Hey everybody. So about a week and a half ago, Riot put their plans forward for fixing top lane. In this video, I'm going to be going over those plans, as well as trying to keep myself focused with 4 bullet points. What are their top lane plans? Have they been successful? What is the issue going forward with champion diversity? And what might backfire on this strategy? Now, I didn't immediately make this video, despite this tweet and their plans being about a week and a half old now, because I wanted to see what they were going to do. In other words, I wanted to wait and see if they were actually going to do anything, because Riot is a long storied history of saying they're going to fix top lane, then not doing anything at all, literally doing nothing. So my dear friends, Froxen and Frox, I think is the other dude, they're like, Frox, the other dude's like his henchman, and this guy's like the dude who puts forward these plans. These two have been kind of, I'm going to call them the workhorses of the live design team. They've been the people who have been going through the nitty gritty, doing the majority of the work, seemingly. And for the most part, I don't really have any issues with these two people. So before I do anything more with this video, I just want to clarify to everybody that you can listen to this on another monitor. You can listen to this while you're playing something. You can put this on your TV and watch me. I'll try to keep it visually stimulating, but you know, we might come to some conversation pieces where I'm just going to be talking, and you know, to be blunt, I'm not going to be able to keep it the most visually stimulating as some other people with dedicated editors could be. So, another thing I want to start with here is to my dear friends Froxen and Flox, I think is the name. I obviously have ideas on what you could do to help fix top lane, and I think the previous video, what killed top lane, which you guys you should go watch that before watching this, but if you haven't, that's fine too. But in that video, I outlined all the nerfs and everything that had led to top lane being in this miserable state. Obviously, I think undoing a lot of those could lead to top lane obviously being a bit better. Failing that, this is mostly just going to be criticism. In effect, I mean, to be blunt, it will be a bit masturbatory in that this is kind of just be me sitting on the sidelines and jerking off and going, haha, look at me, I can criticize you. Which, okay, you know, I'm going to make it more than criticisms, hopefully. But, you know, for the most part, that's going to kind of be what this is. It's going to be a bit of a discussion piece, if you will. I know you guys like longer videos, and so what I'm going to be doing is not kind of, in the past, I would always kind of try to rush through content, try to get it out there as quickly as possible and cut myself off as much. But I think you guys actually enjoy a bit more of a unrehearsed, kind of freely done video where I just talk about these things and you guys can listen to them. That seems to be something that you guys do enjoy. So, first up then, what are their top lane plans? Well, let's read through this tweet. For top lane, after TP item ghost champ changes, we believe top is close on power, but the map feeling decided without you can't be resolved without seasonal level changes. Having one player match the power of 2 in bot is hard, so how would top laners like to impact the game? Now, they did do a poll here. Now, what they're effectively saying is, how can one top laner match the power of 2 bot laners? I don't agree that that's where this argument is. Supports roam very frequently. Supports often go into mid lane. At the low ranks, supports tend to obviously just stay bot lane, but at the high ranks, they tend to go into mid. They sometimes go into top. They often influence the jungler fights. The support can be very impactful to all early to mid game fights, and it's not just bot lane often doesn't just sit there in 2v2 and then have 2 people in strength. In addition to that, a lot of what the complaints are is that a fed bot laner will continue and still does outcarry a fed top laner, that a fed bot laner is stronger than a fed top laner. Now, I did go ahead and look at this chart here, and I'm gonna refresh this. So this is updated. The updated list still shows at Masters Plus that despite having now a lot of time to climb, that top is by far, other than support, the least represented role. In fact, if you look at Iron, the only 2 roles that are less represented than their player base is top and support. Now, obviously, we can all agree here that support will have issues carrying games, but support only loses 5% of their player base going up the ranks. Top, on the other hand, goes from 21% down to 18.6%. That's a 2.4% drop. So support obviously will have issues carrying games, but barely loses numbers, is to see how many people can carry themselves into Masters, whereas top loses a significant amount. In fact, all the rises in mid, jungle, and ADC are basically at the expense of top lane. So fundamentally, going back and to the X website, x.com, I do not agree that top is close on power. Fundamentally, before we get into everything else, you are wrong. Top is not close in power at all. Top is miserable. Maybe at the low ranks, top is close. Maybe, hypothetically. At the high ranks, it's a complete blowout. It is not even close. But let's go over their strategy. A strategy for the rest of the year. Continue buffing weak top laners up rather than nerfing the strong down. For other roles, nerfing the top down rather than buff up. Continue nerfing jungle. Take a look at early snowballing. Incremental changes here have been effective. Now, I do agree. Franks and Flocks, I think, are their names. I don't really, oops, I had that thing up. You guys, I don't really agree with you here, but you have been effective. I would say incremental changes here have been effective. You have been slowly increasing the power of top lane, and you have been slowly reducing the power of jungle, but they have not been nearly fast enough. In other words, top lane is hurling into the sun, and you guys are slowing it down, but you're not really doing enough. Top lane is still hurling into the sun, okay? So I do appreciate you guys here, but clearly it's not enough. Now to clarify here, they want to buff all top laners, they want to nerf people from other roles, they want to continue to nerf the jungle, and they want to make sure early snowballing is addressed. Now obviously, this means that instead of nerfing the best top laners, instead they're going to be buffing top laners up. For other roles, hopefully jungle, instead of constantly shuffling the power level up, they want to shuffle the power level of those roles down. Now that might... To be blunt, I think other roles might see this as a bit unfair. Obviously, buffs and nerfs can happen, but when top lane gets majority buffed over time and other lanes can get majority nerfed over time, this might feel bad for them. I do agree 100% that that's what needs to be done. I do think that other roles... This might sound a bit absurd, but yes, I do agree that every other role other than top has power creeped massively. It is basically an out-of-control... truck. It's just careening, it's just screeching down the highway. The power level of 80 carries, of junglers, of supports, of everyone has just been full throttle, pedal to the floor for the last year. And Riot really needs to go back on this. And yes, top lane has suffered because they, for some reason, have not been they've not been part of this out of control power creep that's been happening. So with that said, I do want to talk about something. When they say, and this is their top lane strategy. So obviously, have they been successful with their top lane plans? Have their plans of, have their plans of slowly buffing up top laners worked? Has that been successful over time? Now, actually, I will show here, just to be clear, I will show here that, yes, I have managed to get Masters this season, again, the second half of the season. I did get Masters again. I didn't even do the majority of it with Aatrox because I was kind of frustrated. I would say Aatrox is probably my most played still, but a lot of that, I can just show you guys. This is post-patch. So this is definitely after Aatrox has been nerfed. These are custom games that I was expecting with some. So you can see I've been playing mostly Aatrox, Malphite, Renekton, Jax. So, I wasn't even abusing Aatrox when he was overpowered. I, for the most part, was actually playing Renekton and Jax because Aatrox spent a lot. But I'm just saying that right now so you guys understand that I'm not coming at this from the perspective of a guy who hasn't played this season. I did put in my work this season. I did play like 70 games, obviously less so than previous seasons because I'm very frustrated at it. But I'm just going to say that. So I just wanted to throw that out there so that no one can say, well, Hashinshin, you have no idea. You haven't even been playing. Yes, I have been playing less, but I still have gotten Masters. Okay, I'm still, I think, in like the top 1,000 players in NA. So, shut up. Have they been successful? So, have they been successful? In order to answer that, I wanted to look here. Now, this is their top lane strategy, and have they been successful? Yes, and this is where I'm going to start to criticize. And why am I going to criticize? Because this is where we're going to start running into issues with their strategy. Their strategy is, we're going to buff top laners up, only buff them up. And for the most part, that has been true. How true has that been? Pretty goddamn true. So going through this list, and I'm going to show you guys this. Of the top 10, well, I'm going to do the top 11, and because Riven is a big example of this, and Riven has been in and out of this top 10 for so many times. And don't pay attention to these win rates either, because we're looking at an early patch. Like we're in hundreds. These win rates are completely meaningless. I'm just looking at what Masters Plus players are playing, their pick rate. Now, their pick rate does tell a story, but their win rate is so insignificant. These stats are completely worthless. I assure you, these stats are worthless. Okay, just look at the pick rate. Okay, so for pick rate, at the number 1, we have Aatrox. What did Riot do for Aatrox? Well, they were following their plans. They buffed his Q damage rather significantly and buffed his ability to wave clear, also not super significantly, but decently. They then went back and nerfed his Q damage, but for the most part, yes, they have buffed his Q damage. That is after the early game, his damage starts going up, and he's doing a bit better, obviously, and he's being picked more, and obviously Aatrox has been buffed. And I assure you this gets to a point, but one thing I'd like to keep in mind is that some of you people don't look at patch notes all the time like I do. So going through these things and kind of reminding everybody that yes, this has happened, yes, this is when it happened, does help to keep us all on a level playing field. It means that we all have the same information in front of us. In the past, have often been very bad at making sure that people know what I know. I'll say, this happened and this happened, and people will be like, no, I don't remember that. I don't think you're telling the truth. And by showing everything, it keeps us all on a level play field. So, of their plan, have they been successful? Yes. Aatrox is now a very high pick champion. Obviously, his win rate and pick rate will come down after he's been nerfed, but he went from like a top 15, top 20 champion to now he's in the top 10. Renekton likewise received a good lot of nerfs. Back in 13.11, his slice, that's his gap closer cooldown, came down by 2 seconds, and the cooldown on his ultimate came down, and the base damage on his ultimate went up. So the number 1 pick was buffed recently, the number 2 pick was buffed recently, the number 3 pick, you might be seeing a pattern here, was also buffed recently. In the 13.1 gameplay update, he was massively, colossally buffed. They did tone it down in 13.4, and they did turn it down in 13.14, but for the most part, Jax sat this entire season being undeniably the single best champion in top lane, and now he is still a top 3 pick. He might go back to being the top number 1 after people cycled through the Aatrox nerfs, but it potentially could just be Renekton, because Renekton is a real powerhouse champion. Camille, you might be noticing a pattern here, has also been buffed recently. If I look at this right now, the last patch, she saw more attack damage growth, and her ultimate does way more damage when she attacks people. So the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4 picks were all buffed. Fiora hasn't been buffed, but by not nerfing Fiora and her being broken for going on 5, 6, 7 years now, I would say that was a buff. Now, I'm obviously joking, and I'm not going to count that as a buff, but you'll notice a pattern here. Fiora is singly the only champion in the top 11 who has not been buffed this year directly in order to force him to be better. Now, that is obviously because Fiora has been giga broken for a very long time, and because she's so broken, she has basically survived through this. Up next, we have Malphite, and for those of you, you probably remember the Malphite buffs. Back in 13.4, they buffed his W rather considerably. At the end of last year, they also buffed his Ground Slam. They did undo some of the buffs to his Thunderclap, but his Thunderclap is still way more damaging than it used to be on a lower cooldown. So Malphite was buffed rather considerably. Rumble, once again, Rumble got that huge rework in 13.12. And this rework has been a significant buff for Rumble. He is doing extremely better. Cosante was released, so, I mean, he's new. I don't know what else to say. Jace, likewise, in 13.1, saw completely unwarranted massive nerfs. I do say they're unwarranted because Jace is a terror on mankind. I would say Jace is practically why all these champions need to be buffed, because as an early game lane bully, he basically bullies you out of playing anything other than other early game lane bullies, because he's just a completely dominant champion who should never be viable. Jay's got more damage, and more damage. And this counts last season's damage and damage and damage and damage and damage buffs. I'm not going to go through all of them. Jace has been buffed rather considerably. He sits there at number 9. At number 10, I'm counting Yone. Yone has been buffed by Riot. When they did the crit item update, Yone got buffed. Then he got his shield buffed again, despite not really... Yone can frequently refrain from using crit items, so by giving him more base armor, more health growth, and more shield, this has definitely made Yone considerably tankier. Actually, they give him more shield, and more shield, and more shield, and reduced the cooldown on his shield, and more armor, and more health, and more shield. In other words, Yone has been buffed rather considerably for top lane again. Up next, we have Riven, who, shockingly, in 13.4 also got buffed. Her passive now scales linearly, meaning it has more thresholds when it would upgrade. It only used to upgrade at like 1, 6, and like 11 or 13 or something like that. And now upgrades at like 1, 3, 4, 5, blah, 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 blah. Do you get it? Okay. So then she also now damages turrets with her passive. The additional damage to turrets and her getting more damage at certain thresholds was a considerable buff to Riven that even I don't think Riot expected to be that big of a buff. Now, she was obviously extremely overpowered when she was buffed, but with all these other champions being buffed, she's gone from very overpowered to just a little overpowered. So I hope I'm getting my point across here. Has Riot been successful? Yes, I would say they were very successful. Basically, every top laner that gets buffed is a champ laner, or sorry, every top laner in the top 10, and I'm kind of including Riven because she keeps going in and out of the top 10. So I'm just including her to include her, right? She's kind of being brought along with this, right? All these champions have been buffed by Riot, with the exception of Fiora, who was just so freaking overpowered and has been so goddamn overpowered for so long that she's kind of like grandfathering into this system. So the only champion is Fiora. What is the issue with this problem? I should say, what is the issue with this solution they have to the top lane problem? What is the issue that I've seen happen all the time when Riot tries this solution to top lane? And they have tried this solution other times throughout the years. Well, the first problem is, what is the issue going forward with champion diversity? The reason I did all this wasn't because I was trying to toot my own horn or go, aha, I can show stats, I'm so smart. The reason I did this was to show, do you notice the problem with the only champions who are viable are champions that Riot in the last year has decided to buff? And really, I should say the last half year, because we're only halfway through this year. Any champion that Riot has not gone through and personally buffed is basically shit out of luck and totally unviable at present. They also buffed Gwen, but she'll get up the list. We'll see it. In other words, champions like Olaf, like Olaf, Kled. I think Kled got buffed, but it was not nearly enough to keep up. Shen, champions like Urgot. There's another big one. York kind of got buffs, but it wasn't enough. All these champions, Mundo, Trundle, you can see mostly, and all these champions who aren't here. I'm trying to go through this and be fair, right? But in other words, effectively, the tanks that weren't buffed are obviously struggling. The bruisers that weren't buffed are just not being seen up here. And we are seeing that champions who used to be viable, like Olaf, are now starting to suffer. The problem here with this strategy is that it does create champion diversity issues. The way I'll describe it is the Warhammer 40k problem. Anyone who's ever played Warhammer 40k knows that generally, not all the time, but generally, what are the strongest factions? The ones that just got updated. Whoever has the newest codex. Who are the weakest factions? The ones with the oldest codex. Now, that's not true 100% of the time, but it is a good rule of thumb. It is a good rule to apply. The newer your codex, the stronger. The older your codex, the weaker. And that is effectively what's happening now in top lane. Now, while this problem has plagued League of Legends forever, we can see there do exist champions like Fiora, who, despite buffs, despite nerfs, continues to be viable. The problem we're seeing is the champions who don't get buffed, who don't get updated, like Darius. Darius is now out of the top 10 firmly, despite being a top 5 pick for a very long time, and being a top 10 pick then for a very long time, he's now being forced out of the top 10. Champions like Olaf, who were top 15, top 10 picks for a while, are now being forced out as well. Other champions like Gangplank are just way out. Champions like Set are just gone at 25. Klud's never been popular, but he's way out. Set is starting to fall out. You get the idea here. Effectively, this solution has large issues for champion diversity. Now, if they continue to do these changes, that's probably a good thing. If they continue to go through every top lane champion, if they have 2 or 3 of them being buffed every single patch, or at the very least being readjusted to be more viable, then that will obviously, in my opinion, promote a healthier, stronger top lane that can more compete. However, and because I've seen Riot pull this strategy so many times, what might backfire on this strategy? Well, that should be kind of obvious to anyone who pays attention. The backfire will very quickly be if these champions start going into a different lane. The problem here is Riot has tried the solution of top lane gets overpowered champions to make up for being a weak role. They have tried that solution in the past. The issue is not all the time, but sometimes these champions can start going into mid lane, going and dominating in the mid lane. We've seen this with Kosante at LCS, LCK, the tournament level, that people will pick Kosante and they'll just whoop over to mid lane, and now you have a strong champion in the mid lane. We've seen it where Malphite will be used in mid lane to counterpick some AD champions. Jax has been done there. We've seen Renekton a few times. Aatrox, I suspect, might be showing up, maybe. The Yone with his buffs doesn't seem to be much of a competitive champion, so I don't have much to worry about that. Jace has shown up in mid lane a few times. The backfiring here is pretty simple. We might see a situation where Riot, through buffing these champions and trying to promote a stronger top lane through just buffing all the champions over and over again, we might see the issue that these champions just start going mid lane, in which case Riot might need to nerf them, at which case then we have kind of completely undone the entire work we've done on buffing these. Now, I would say this time we have been a bit more careful, and by we, I mean, well, Riot, it's not like I'm working on this. I'm just here criticizing, right? I'm here saying this is what you're going to have to look out here, because, at the end of the day, I do play top lane, and me giving out a video like this, at the very least, I don't know if any Rioter will ever watch this. I'm assuming someone does, considering that, they do tend to steal my ideas sometime. But I'm assuming that Riot would at some point actually try to watch this. And the thing I'm trying to say is look out for this problem. Now, in my last video, I went over all the nerfs that top lane's gotten, and, undoing things like the conditioning nerf, undoing things that top lane historically is used to scale might be good too. Just as one example, why does top lane not have a good MR item? Why does Rageblade give so much magic pen? Why is Lord Dominik's an anti-bruiser, anti-tank, anti-squishy, kill everything, murder, slaughter item? I don't think that tends to be good for the game to have one item that makes AD carries counter everything and anything, because then once they get to that item, they counter anything and everything. To understand what I'm trying to say here. Okay. So I think that this is not a bad idea, but what I would also recommend is, just purely as an addendum here, could you consider, as one example, that tanks should maybe scale better? Now, I know, you know what, I'm not even going to go into that, because that's a whole other issue, and, I don't want to be rambling at the end of this video too much. Basically, what might backfire with this strategy? Very likely, I shouldn't say very likely, but what can happen here is what we've seen in the past. Riot gives a lot of tools to top laners to survive, Doran's Shield, Second Wind, etc. Then people take those and they start going mid lane with them, and they start using them to play melee champions into ranged champions, but in mid lane, because mid lane is still stronger than top lane. Especially because you guys have unnerfed mid lane. Mid lane is back to being stronger than top lane. So a lot of top laners could take those champions that are particularly powerful, and they could start playing them in mid lane, where they're more powerful. At which point mid laners will complain, and then we're kind of back at square one, where Okay, now we just have a strong mid lane, but a weak top lane. Again. Now Riot did say here, but the map feeling decided without you can't be resolved without seasonal level changes. When I look at this, I see an obvious problem here, right? The problem here is I have been promised, we top laners have been promised so many times that you'll look into it next season. In fact, this season was when you were supposed to be looking into it from last season. Did we get any changes this season? No. So last season, you said you'd look into it this season. This season, you're saying you're going to look into it next season. Look, all I'm saying is you guys are my dad and you have never come back with the milk. You just keep leaving me a text message. I'm coming home soon. When is soon? Right? Because it never seems to happen. Every time you say we'll look into it, you never look into it. Or maybe you are looking into it and deciding, nah, actually, you'd rather work on another 80 carry item update. So, I do like the buffs to bruiser items, but here's another problem, and I'm just gonna list this right here. We are seeing way too frequently that top laners, Aatrox, Riven, a lot of these champions actually are using lethality items. Using lethality mythics. Bruiser mythics. If I could look into who is still using bruiser mythics here, we have 1, 2, 3. Oh, wow. I thought it would actually be more. Wait, are you serious? 1, 2, 3, 4. Fiora. I think Fiora still. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that it? No way. Wow. So 4 out of 11 are using bruiser mythics. I know 11 is a weird number, but again, by the end of the day, Riven could be back in the top 10. Okay, do you get my point here? 4 out of 11 are using bruiser mythics. That's not good. Aatrox should be using a bruiser mythic. Riven should be using a bruiser mythic. I think the problem, Riot, that you have created is you have made bruiser mythics so goddamn weak that basically you have Renekton with Gore Drinker because it's like his perfect item. I'm not going to go into why, but it's just like his perfect item. Jax, Camille, and Fiora use Divine Sunderer, and that's it. So if Divine Sunderer got removed, it would literally only be Renekton with Gore Drinker. I definitely feel there's an issue with itemization here, right? And I feel that issue is that some bruisers are not incentivized to build health and not incentivized to have any health scaling. Renekton's ultimate makes, for example, Stark's Gauge very good on him. Aatrox and Riven have no health scaling, no bonus health, no reason to go into bruiser items. So as many times as you guys can buff bruiser items, it doesn't matter. Aatrox will go with Duskblade right now because it's just a really overpowered item, but you made it overstat and overpowered to try to force 80 assassins to be viable. So I guess my advice to Riot is, could you please work on the bruiser mythics that aren't Divine Sunderer? I know you guys have buffed them, but like the problem is fundamentally like maybe Aatrox should finally get a health ratio in his kit somewhere. Maybe Riven should finally get a health ratio in her kit somewhere. Maybe Riven's shield should scale less on damage and maybe it should have some health scaling. It's just an idea. Maybe Aatrox's passive could get some pre-mitigation healing based on health. Maybe it just heals like 3.5% of his health, something like that. And I'm not, obviously he would need to be nerfed if you did something like that, but I'm just giving the idea because when bruisers start playing like AD assassins, and yes, Riven has always had that edge where she's always at the edge between an AD assassin and a bruiser, right? But Aatrox definitely has been free falling into that, okay? And we're seeing that very few actual bruiser mythics are being built, that they're all kind of at the sideline, not really being good. Even our pal Darius, you know, if it wasn't for Darius, the next one would be at 17. So even if we included the top 20, there'd only be Garen, Olaf, and Darius So we would, in this situation, would be 7 out of the top 20 top laners are using bruiser mythics. That is not a very high number for the lane. Like, if we looked in bot lane, how many AD carry mythics are being built? If we looked at mid lane, how many mage and AD assassin mythics are being built? But when we look at the bruiser lane, where we have all these bruisers, how many bruiser mythics are being, you get what I'm trying to say here? I'm rambling a bit here, but you get my point here, Riot. It's just a suggestion. So what could backfire in this strategy? What could backfire in this strategy is, yes, we might see bruisers going to other lanes, but I do like the idea of what's going on here. Now, as I wrap up this video, as I end this video, I'm gonna say I wasn't intending in first to make this video. I didn't know if I should even make this video, to be blunt. But you guys seem to like videos where I talk about stuff and talk about, issues with League of Legends. You guys kind of like when I discuss things. I often make these videos and then I think to myself, no one's gonna want to listen to this. No one cares about this. No one cares. But I've been trying to get better at actually putting out more discussion piece videos, putting out things where I just talk more, because you guys do tend to enjoy them. Sometimes I get low views, but my last couple of videos have been, they've done pretty decent, right? And I'm gonna try to do more of them going forward. With that said, tomorrow I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3. So if you want to see that, subscribe to my variety channel. I'll be playing Baldur's Gate 3 solo, and then later in the day with a group. So if you're looking forward to that, go to my Kick or go to my variety channel on YouTube. I'll be hopefully dual streaming on both of them. So thank you to everybody who likes, leaves a comment, subscribes, anything like that. What do you think of Riot's plan? Do you think it's a good one? Do you think it's a bad one? Do you think it's going to work? Do you think it's going to backfire? Do you have an issue with the champion diversity? Are you an Urgot player? Are you a Darius player? Are you feeling left out by their strategy? Are you a set player? Because set players, ooh boy. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Special shout out to my Patreon members. You guys are extremely beneficial. My YouTube members, my Kick subscribers. Thank you, all of you guys. Thank you, everybody. I hope all of you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everyone.